Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm your host, Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach. I really help people rewire their nervous system, get in alignment with what they want. And I am joined by my co-host and producer, Holly Dechenes. How are you doing today, Holly?
I'm good, Brandon. We are not in person today, and it's a little bit of a letdown.
It
Yeah.
really is. Once you have those bigger experiences, it's hard to go back to the normal stuff. It's important to get those because it gives you something to shoot for, right? You
Yeah.
expand and then it's like, okay, how do I make this my regular thing now? A good example is like flying first class or something like that. You get these experiences to kind of see what it's like, and you might not be at the level where that can be a normal thing, but it's something to kind of help you wrap your mind around it. And so with every expansion, then we are confronted with our current reality and maybe the limitations we may be functioning from. And so when you have those new experiences, then okay, I snap back into my normal life, and then it gets you thinking a little bit differently. How do I make these things happen?
Right.
What's a different version that's better, that's workable right now? That kind of stuff. So, all those things are very important. Today's conversation is going to be, we're calling it permission to balance or to stay steady. It's kind of how do we calm the storm under pressure? This is an emotional regulation in pressure situations. So through this lens, we're always looking to dial into the stress response and see what's going on behind it. The more we do this work, the more calm your system gets in general. So you can put yourself in pressure situations and perform better and be that calm center for other people around you if needed. We're going to go into a little bit about why our system gets flooded in those moments, and then also establish some tools of how to sort through it and how to get better next time. Immediately comes to mind as a baseball player, kind of closing the end of the game. Let's say it's a close game, you might only be up by a couple runs. And there's that feeling of like, well, I always remember back to that being the toughest outs were at the end, okay? Because your mind's like, oh, I have to finish this out. The stress starts to dial up. You start to feel the pressure. And if there's going to be kind of you try to close the door, but there can be this surge of momentum from the other team. And if they start to get a few base hits, if their runners are on and it starts to kind of look like things might go sideways on you, like the nervous system starts to dial up. It's your
Yeah.
heart starts racing, doubts can come in. I teach a lot about how to regulate in those situations. It's how do I feel what I'm feeling and allow those feelings to happen while staying present? Because what's really going on there in the background is our mind is going back to our past, and it's looking at maybe times I've failed in that situation. Maybe I didn't get the desired result, or maybe I let people down, disappointed teammates or parents, coaches, whatever it is. That all points to, that kills our confidence. I remember when I didn't have success here. The more
Right.
that happens, the more the nervous system contracts and starts to tighten up on us. And we need to unlock that to create the flow again so that we can perform our best. Really, the key to high pressure situations, it's basically this ability to minimize the situation so we can get back to our baseline. And that can be very difficult in the moment, but that's why practice is so important. That's why a developed skill set is so important, is we need to have things we can go back to when times are tough. It all really comes back to a lot of preparation that helps us build the confidence where we can have things, some certainties to latch onto. And in those moments, we can start to calm the nervous system. We can do the deep breathing. We can use positive affirmation to try and settle our system so that we can be present and then also execute or get the results we're after. We're going to go into the mechanics of these things. Do you have anything you'd like to share on that end?
Sure. A little before this, we were talking about examples of high pressure situations, and I think of one related to the work that I do outside of the podcast stuff where I was on a work trip. It was a pretty stressful work trip, lots of stress and pressure related to the things that were happening. I got back from the trip and it's like a core memory for me. I remember walking through the back door. We lived in a different house at the time than we do now, but walking in the back door, like putting the suitcase down and saying to my husband, "We need to remodel the living room." And when I said that, everything felt so like heavy from this trip that I was just looking for something to relieve that feeling.
Yeah, so this desire to, okay, I'm feeling all this tension in my body. I need something to change. We can do that externally. I would say entertainment's a big version of that, right? It's like,
Sure.
oh, I had a stressful week. I need to go unwind, right? So I'm going to go out or something like that, right? It's
Right.
like they're just what helps dial down the pressure within us. Okay, that's a good example where it's like, well, that tension of the week, you that made you feel more calm to try and change your environment around you, right?
Right.
And there's no right or wrong to any of these things, but it's like, well, I think the important piece is why don't we look internally and try and sort that out first? And then because just a lot of bad decisions are made under pressure, right? A lot of
Yeah.
things we
Yeah.
regret, it's impulsive decisions of I feel like this thing's going to make me feel better, and so I'm going to pull the trigger on it. Yeah, I think online shopping is probably one of those, right? Where it's just, oh, I'm going to go buy stuff and then I can feel better or something. There's a million different versions of this. We can go into addictions and things of that nature as well, but it's this not feeling very safe inside, feeling a lot of tension, maybe frustration, irritation, things of that nature. So our goal is always to build this internal framework where we can rework these things to dial down that pressure so that we can release the tension in a healthy, productive way. And then when we find that center, that's where we show up our best. That's where we're level headed to make good decisions. That's where we're not in this kind of impulsive mode where maybe we can look a little bit more long term. That helps guide our decision making where I'm not trying to get immediate relief, but I can have access to more big picture thinking. There's the unwinding after a high pressure situation. That's one version of it. Also, the other version is in the moment, what do I do? There's
Right.
kind of two channels because the one's kind of carryover from it. It's just the tension builds up and I haven't released it properly in a way to de stress or unwind. The other one is like, well, yeah, do I shut down in important situations? Do I not show up as my best self when I need to? Maybe I need to shine for work or performance or whatever it is. Am I able to meet those moments, or do I get too flooded by my emotions and the negative thought processes? I don't get the best out of myself. That's also a different spiral where if I'm not able to show up when I need to, now we have like things like shame coming in afterwards and being hypercritical or maybe not feeling very good about ourselves because of it. And it's a common thing with, especially with athletes. There can be a bit of a downward spiral if we don't properly unpack these things. Let's say if you fail in the spotlight, that can be a pretty devastating thing. That can be a huge hit to your self-worth, your value, all those things. It's important to be able to navigate these things in a healthy way. And also, really, my message is always like you gain control of everything by actually learning to feel. I need to be able to feel my body in order to balance it out. So this is nervous system regulation is I have to pay attention to where the blocks are or the tension in my nervous system are. I need to be able to find ways to navigate that or to clear those channels so that the energy can flow in a clean way again. It's my association to the stress. It's what I believe about those situations that may plug me into that fight or flight response. It's either I'm going to rise to the occasion, we get the adrenaline surge, and it's just, do I handle that well, or do I want to hide and run away? Or do I freeze? Or do I like kind of fawn a little bit? That's that kind of more submissive energy where I'm timid. Most things aren't very beneficial to be functioning in those ways, right? We probably need more of the fight usually to fight through but it's like if we have this negative connotation to that. So an important one here is like, let's say we've shut off our fight function because maybe things around us have been like modeled where maybe there's like abusive people or somebody that version of their nervous system showed up in a very negative way and was very painful for us. So we don't want to be that way. That might cause us to shut down where I'm just like, oh, I'm not going to access that part of my system. But that might be what I need in performance. So these things can cause a lot of conflicts. We're talking about when the pressure dials up and maybe I'm in the spotlight. Okay, what's going on internally? When I'm coaching athletes, we address things head on. The preparation part is like, well, Is there any past failures linked to this subject matter? The last time you did this, how did this go? That's an important thing because if it didn't go the way we wanted it to and we didn't unpack it, there's going to be some conflicts to resolve there where we might not be fully confident in what we're doing. That's one aspect. The other one is like, well, what's my association to being seen and heard and respected and being in, like, let's say I don't want to be in the spotlight. Like, let's say there's a reluctance to that. That might be very tough for me to meet the moment. So generally that goes back to childhood, our conditioning there of was it safe to be seen or did I just want to hide most of the time? Did I just kind of want to blend in the background? These things can be big challenges when I go to put myself out there in new ways. I would say for any listener, there's going to be some version of your life where you're probably wanting to put yourself out there, but there's this hesitation, this reluctance. Other versions of it is yeah, maybe things didn't go the way I wanted it to, and maybe I was criticized heavily for something in the past. Maybe I feel like I let somebody down or other people were disappointed in me. It could be that judgment of others. That could be the piece that shuts us down in that moment. We don't trust ourselves under pressure because some bad thing happened or we got criticized for making a mistake. So that could adopt a bit of a perfectionist mentality. So there's so many different angles we can hit on this in terms of like when the pressure comes, like how do I meet that moment? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to clear the circuits. We're trying to get to this place of I have a healthy relationship with whatever I'm about to do. And it's having a tough conversation or presenting at work or going to perform. It's like, well, do I feel good when I go to do those things, or is there a lot of anxiety and tension? And all those anxieties and tension is going to be based on the past. You have anything you like to add on this?
No, that all makes sense. And I was just trying to, as you were going through like the options of how it could show up, I'm like, I can point to times where pressure showed up in all of those ways in terms of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn situation, depending on the relationship, depending on the specifics of the situation.
Hmm.
I think I've experienced all of. I would say patterns, you and I talk about this, patterns for me tend to be more the freeze, shrink, or the fawn sort of thing. Although I will tell you when something feels particularly like pressure filled in some way, my instinct is to leave, which would be flight.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, so these are when it boils down to it, they're survival strategies that came from earlier in life. It's like when we're talking about a time when we're powerless, we don't have very much control over things. What's the best option in those modes? If there wasn't safety, if there was chaos around us, and if that chaos meant pain, we can definitely opt for or it could be a dissociation too. I might totally
yeah,
disconnect. I might not be present at all, like when I'm in these pressure situations. It's all linked to that stuff. Okay. And so
right.
all this stuff gets overlooked constantly. My message is always like, you got to go deeper. That's why, with athletes, especially, I don't really like even talking about the sport because most of your performance issues have nothing to do with the sport. It's always upbringing, like, what do you believe about this stuff? What do you believe about yourself? Because those are the things that activate the stress response, right? And these are all pre-programmed responses, meaning like I developed these coping mechanisms a long time ago. And so when we're talking about getting to high performance, we do need to address that stuff because you can override it here and there, but if I start stacking stresses, the example you gave where it's like just a high pressure week. There's like tons of stuff thrown at you, right? If you're not like unpacking that stuff and it stacks up so much, now it's just like I do need some sort of like outburst in some version, right? Because the tension built so much that, we just need outlets to move the energy because we can't just store it all inside, right? And
Right.
all these things, it's always we want to do our best to handle it in the moment, and that's not always possible. And then also the carryover aspect is if I still feel stressed out, if I'm exhausted, if I'm worn out, there might be some work I need to do on the back end to clean things up. And if we're not doing those things, We keep accumulating more and more stress, and then the heavier that gets. We're more likely to cave under pressure when we've got 15 unresolved things hanging out in the background, right? So in the moment when these things happen, I'm generally going to get some sort of pressure that's happening in my body, and it's my association or my relationship to that pressure or tension that's going to really determine which aspect of the nervous system, which avenue I go down. Do I rise to the occasion? Do I fall back? Do I try to hide? Do I try to run away? All those things are that's your association or relationship to whatever you're doing. This could be very context based as well. So there could be some situations where, yeah, I can meet the moment there, like I can step up. But other times I want to hide and I'm in the background.
Right.
It's not like across the board, depending on your relationship with that and the things we're more confident in, that's where we're generally going to step up. Okay, so that's why we want to really work at things and problem solve and get stronger and develop our skill sets, is because that's what allows us to meet the moment. And on top of that, as we're doing that skill development through whatever channel, we're also unpacking things that are in conflict with who we want to become. So, yeah, what type of person do I need to be in these moments in order to have success? I can start
Right.
to conceptualize that. And now I need that exposure to the stress over and over again. I'm going to go put myself in a stressful situation. I'm going to see how I do. So I'm gonna be feeling the tension and stress in my body, and my mind's gonna be telling me different things about myself or the situation. And if that stuff's not working, if it's putting us in a negative state, if it's producing poor results, then we've got some work to do. And so that's afterwards, we unpack it and we try to rework it. We try to bring our mindset to a healthier place. That's going to be perception shifts. I'm going to try to see the situations differently. I'm going to go back to past failures. I'm going to go back to the times where it was really hard on me. Like I went through a lot of disappointment and letdown, and I'm going to unpack that. And I'm going to try to learn about, okay, what did I do wrong there? With this, we're trying to develop self-awareness. So I think many people like go into this mindset of, let's say you pretty much never do public speaking, right? You're not going to go up there and shine, right? Like
Right.
it's
Yeah, that'd be a rare
yeah,
person. Yeah.
it's like, yeah, you might be able to pull it off for a little bit, but if, yeah, you maybe had some big beginner's luck or something, but it's like, is that sustainable? Like, no, you haven't built the skill set. So it is just continually revisiting things over and over again, making adjustments, refining it. Like that's the process to anything. We need to go into things with realistic expectations. If
Yeah.
I haven't put the work in, I might feel like an imposter, right? Because I actually am, right? Like it's
Yeah.
it's like our nervous system's going to be telling us that too. It's going to be like, yeah, I'm not very confident in what I'm doing. I'm just kind of winging it, right? We can have short-term success kind of anywhere, we can get lucky here and there, but it's like if we're going to like build something sustainable, it's going to take time, energy, and effort and on a regular basis, consistency is key. That's how we build that confidence to really, okay, because if I put myself in these pressure situations and let's say it goes perfectly to plan, which it almost never does. If there's no unexpected variables, I might do all right. Okay. But what happens in real life is there's things that pop in that we don't expect. They catch us off guard. That's what activates the stress response within us is of like, oh, I wasn't prepared for this. That can be a freak out moment, right? That can be my heart's racing and I don't know what to do. That's where we turn to regulation. I'm going to feel this. I'm going to try and process it a little bit in the moment so it's not so intense. What we're going to do is we're going to focus on the tension. We're actually probably going to first start and focusing on our heart because if our heart's racing, we need to calm it down. So I need to ground myself. I'm going to be focusing on the heart. I'm going to be taking deep breaths. And internally, I'm going to be telling myself calming thoughts. I'm just going to be, I've got this. It's going to be okay. I'll get through this. We're just trying to soothe our nervous system because what happens when we're hit with something unexpected, especially in a pressure situation, the impact is amplified and then we get very in our head. When we're very in our head, our mind starts to jump around to anything that could be a potential threat to us. Our system actually goes into this overdrive where we're going to be scanning our environment like crazy, trying to figure out what do I do? Most things aren't actually life and death. So that's the perspective we bring into everything. Our mind might think it's life and death because we're wired for survival. So we have to be able to calm and center, like in the storm, in the chaos, and the I don't know what to do here. Part of that, the answer might be vulnerability. It might be like the acknowledgement that I don't know what I'm doing here. Because a lot of us are trying to put out an image where we're trying to pretend like we've got it all figured out. Part
Yeah.
of it is like, well, if I haven't mastered this subject, there's going to be a lot of things that can throw me off. And in that place, there might be some aspects that I'm stumbling along. Yeah, maybe I blank when I'm like trying to speak about something. It's just this ability to be vulnerable and stumble through it can actually produce better results for us because we're being real with it. We're stepping out of the trying to project an image and we're just being present with the situation. That's all we're
Yeah.
trying to do when we regulate is we're trying to be present with whatever's going on. That means that there's going to be things that can pop up, but we can't account for all the variables. We can't possibly know everything that's going to happen. That's why we got to go do things and see what happens a lot of time. There has to be this willingness to stumble through things. That's actually how you grow because then afterwards you unpack it and you're just like, well, I wasn't prepared for that. Now I know where the work is. I know where I have to go figure this out.
You made me think of a couple things in that. One, the aspect of volume slash practice. You talked about like we're going to put ourselves in stressful situations as we work through this and see what happens. And what I was thinking of is I recently was watching a video where they were talking about how people become great at something and they were using like composers as the examples. It was like Bach and Beethoven and Chopin and all like that kind of thing. And they talked about the volume of work that they produced to become great. So I think about that a little bit. Like there's an aspect of that to this. Like you have to, this isn't a one and done. Like we have to go back and do it again and do it again to actually fully get to that place. Because the second question that sort of came up for me was when you talked about you're going to be deep breathing, calming thoughts. I can remember situations where I attempted to use that topic and my own stupid brain would not believe the calming thoughts, right? Like it was
Mhm.
like, I got this, it's fine. And they're like, no, you don't. Nope, you don't got this. It's not okay. You're not going to be fine, right? So but it's like a muscle that you have to work.
Well, and the only way we get out of it is by feeling, to be honest with you, because it's if we have like some pretty intense limiting beliefs in there, like that might be the feedback we're getting, where it's actually we're battling ourselves in the moment. But it's working through that tension. It's continuing to stay present with it, being like, because emotions are waves. It's like they roll through us unless we stop them with judgment. So judgment is going to be in an instance like that, it could be like, oh, like I'm a failure, like I'm not good enough. I could start like hammering down the negative thinking and it slows the energy down. It like basically stops it. So now I'm all jammed up. And if the more intense that gets, I could kind of hit that paralyzing moment, right? Where I'm totally shut down or dissociated. And so our only shot is this ability to have that permission to feel the emotions as they're coming up and we acknowledge them. And as long as you can breathe into it and just stick with the neutralizing thoughts. That's why I prefer neutralizing rather than positive. So what happens with this is like if I have like an extreme negative belief and I try to give myself too much of a positive statement, my nervous system is going to be like, no, that's not true. And that's where we're going to get a tug of war, right? It's going to be a battle because I try to go too far from my current reality. And so my reality is going to be based on my beliefs. So I want to like start to work what's a one step above it that's close enough that I could try to start to buy into. We want to work our way to neutral. If we can get to slightly positive, that's a bonus, but we're really just trying to neutralize extreme negative thinking to okay, what's maybe some pessimistic thinking? What's like a lighter version of the negative? Because that's starting to create some wiggle room there. That's basically the stair I'm trying to climb. It's because if I try to go too far, now there's like no acceptance of whatever I'm trying to tell myself. That's the thing. If I haven't put the work in, also, how can I expect to do well? I
Right.
have to have the beginner's mindset of like, I don't know anything here, and I'm going to try it out. When I detach from like expectation, now I can go through the cycles of like, yeah, I'm a beginner, I'm trying to figure this out, and so I need to get some experience with it, and I'm going to make mistakes. I need people to show me what to do, right? And a lot of, especially I would say career-wise, like a lot of people get put in positions where, they have no idea what they're doing, but they're, feel like they have to know what they're doing, and so they pretend, right? But that's the vulnerability piece is like I can't actually improve on anything unless like I admit that, like I have no idea what I'm doing relative to this subject matter, right? And that could be like, well, yeah, maybe I'll lose my job or something like that if I admit that. So, but it's like I have to at least be real with myself so that I can start the development process. These things of like, how many of us have that experience? A subject matter in school we really struggled with, right? You're in the same grade as everybody else and you're kind of like expected to be at these levels, right? But you might not be there. And that's like one of the most terrifying things is be like, well, I don't get it. Like I can't even ask questions about this because I'm too terrified to, right? Because I
Right.
feel like everybody else knows what they're doing and I don't want to be seen that way, right? It was certain like math subjects, like I'd be, good at geometry, but bad at algebra, right? So I'm just going to stumble through this. I didn't have like the desire to learn it. Like I didn't really care about it. It was just kind of like, oh, I'm just going to get by here. But if I really needed to learn that to develop a skill set that I actually wanted, then that's where the vulnerability comes in, where I have to admit I don't know what I'm doing here. And then basically you
Right.
kind of tear it down and start at square one. We have that imposter syndrome piece of like maybe there's some skill sets I miss. Maybe being put into situations I'm not quite prepared for. That is where my mind will be kind of telling me that stuff. If you don't really know what you're doing here, but you got to fake it. You got to pretend like right? That's going to cause that racing heart. And so we can make it up in the moment and we can get through things, but if something's really important for us to develop, we also owe it that service to really dig in and be like, okay, this is an aspect that's holding me back. With the coaching business, it's just I don't care about marketing, right? But like I need to, right?
Right.
it's
Yeah.
like it's like I want to coach, but if I want people to coach, I got to do this, right? So it's like, all right, well, once you start to connect it to the purpose, it's like, okay, I can do this work now. But the work's the work, and what's the work we're avoiding? And that's usually where we feel the most pressure is because we don't have a developed skill set behind something. That's the call to, okay, I have to go do that. It would serve us to have realistic expectations around that, and then so that we're not putting extra pressure on top of ourselves. It's already hard enough when you're not good at something or you don't know it. But if I operate under this idea of like I'm supposed to know it or I should know it or I have to be perfect at it, now it's like I've just added all these extra pieces that don't need to be there. So much of it
Right.
is about being present with your own personal process. And so that means I have to like separate myself out from everybody else and be like, well, I have to tell myself truth. I have to get real about things and take a deeper look because that might be the aspect that's like killing me under pressure. It's just I'm missing a big piece here and my nervous system's telling me that, but I'm not listening.
You've touched on a couple of situational examples where people can feel a lot of pressure. And we, in my work outside of this sort of stuff, tough conversations is one that comes up a lot. Just thinking through in terms of the pressure in that, there's various reasons that people feel pressure about it. One, it could be I'm worried my message won't land or I won't be clear. It could be I'm worried I'm going to hurt the other person's feelings. It could be maybe they're going to get super angry at me if I try to have this conversation. I just wonder if you would talk through a little bit about, let's just start with that one in terms of tough conversations, what that looks like situationally in terms of staying balanced, regulated through something like that.
We're always looking to own our part of everything because that's the only piece we can control. We can't control how somebody's going to respond to anything. First is we want to have some prep work, right? We want to think about the situation and we want to start to dissipate some of our own emotions around it beforehand as much as possible because we want to try and come into this thing with as balanced perspective as possible. But the pressure itself is going to be because of uncertainties. There's too many variables in any given situation that I can't possibly account for everything. I have to have this frame of mind of I'm going to be taking a risk here. and that's okay. But the motivation for having a tough conversation is generally going to be growth and to create understanding. We could dial into what's the cost of not having the conversation. That's one aspect. If I'm walking on eggshells or if I'm really struggling with the way things are, like, can I continue this way and at what cost? So there's that aspect of like, well, we want to get to the point of like, okay, I need to do this no matter what. We want to do our prep work. We want to try to formulate our thoughts as much as possible around the situation. And then also know that we don't know how the other person's going to respond. There's an inherent tension that's within that. Like any sort of conflict creates tension. What we teach here is the tension is that's a growth opportunity. Early on, we talked about sitting with discomfort, right? And discomfort is this tool for growth. When something feels bad, we're more motivated to do something about it because we don't want to feel that way anymore. And so those are the best ways to improve relationships. And if something's to the point where a tough conversation totally ruins the relationship, I would argue there's probably a lot that's stacked up there, right? There's probably a lot that came beforehand that wasn't addressed, but it can be a breaking point. And if that's the case, like what are we even hanging on for if there's nothing left, right? There's a lot of big questions here, but it's that anxiety that comes up. And so we know the tension's there and we're breathing into it. And the mindset is like, I'm going into this because something's got to change. And the only way it's going to change is like, because it's creating an understanding between us and we can't control the other person. If somebody's shut down and not willing to hear us, there's not a lot we can do about that. So that's also a major question. Is the person that you want to have the conversation with, are they even receptive to anything? Have you tried before? Have you tried multiple ways to get through to them? Because some things we might have to actually make peace with on our own because we might not get what we need from the other person. And so we can do this work to clear our system to try and create that peace. But ultimately, it is just as we go approach the situation, it is taking some deep breaths. And I don't know how this person's going to react, but as long as I'm present with the situation, generally I can be in tune with which direction it's going to go and I can make those adjustments. But if I've already made up my mind about something and I'm taking those past judgments into the situation, now I might just be trying to prove something to this person. Okay, and that's a trap. There's no way out of that. If I need to win the argument, because it should be a collaboration. So we want ideally two willing participants. If one of them's totally shut off, we don't have much to work with. But sometimes we need to say things to at least get them off our chest. There's a lot of dynamics to this, just being willing to be okay with whatever the result brings. And we don't know what that's going to look like. And if I start to get emotionally charged in a conversation, I'll start pacing my breathing, right? As things are dialing up, I start taking deep breaths and I start talking slower. I start to sound it out. I'll be like, because if I know the other person's triggered as well, I'll preface it where I'm like, I'm trying to sound this out the best I can, right? Like I'll have a moment of vulnerability because like I'm not actively trying to hurt the other person. I'm trying to communicate in a triggered place. They're triggered. So I'm trying to say things in a way that they can hear me. Part of it is like admitting a vulnerability of like, I know I'm not going to say this perfectly. So it's prefacing
Right.
it because that shows like intent that I'm really trying to communicate an effective way to this person, right? And so that's it's allowing it to be messy. It's allowing it to not be perfect. It's allowing it to happen however it needs to happen, but it's the sticking with it piece, okay? You get to a certain point of the conversation like, yeah, can we continue down this road or do we need to take a step back and reassess? It's just giving the situation what it needs because some big conversations might not resolve in one shot, especially if there's big gaps or big differences, because in that gap both people are projecting their belief system into that gap. It's just I'm trying to create an understanding of me and you, and I'm trying to understand you better, right? So we're trying to bridge the gap by working through these things, and that tension, as we start to dissipate the tension, the understanding starts to connect too. It's the ability to stick with these things, and if you get emotionally flooded, it's that acknowledgement, like, hey, I need a break, right? Like I need to take a step back from this. I need to reset. I need to gather my thoughts because each tough conversation is going to bring more information, but I might need time to process that before I go any further too. So that's the idea. We may need a number of different strategies to get through something, especially if it's really difficult. It may need to be revisited over and over again. We might need to unpack each layer of it so that we can get a little bit further the next time. So that's the thing. If it's something that's really important, you do that work, and hopefully you have a willing participant that's willing to do that as well.
So, similar, slightly different situation. What, in the case of you, you are not the deliverer,
Hmm.
you are the receiver of criticism, feedback, something that feels unexpected. How does that differ?
Well, so for something to really hurt us, there's generally got to be some sort of truth to it. That's the hard part. Because if somebody says something to you and you like know yourself at a really deep level and you're just like, yeah, that there's nothing to that, that's a different energy, right? But if somebody says something that's got some spikes to it and it sticks to you, it's just, well, yeah, maybe there's part of my blind spot that they're kind of poking at. We all have these things. Like none of us are perfect. None of us have like ultimate awareness. With this work, we try to increase awareness so that we can be more conscious about our actions, but we just all have things that are tougher to see. So it could be if I get some feedback and it really hurts, like that could be waking up an old wound of mine. It could bring to my awareness something that, maybe I'm ashamed of. It could be that it's showing me an aspect of myself that I've kind of denied. If something really hurts when somebody says it. Okay. That's an opportunity for growth once again, if that really happens. So my goal is usually to try and become immune to things. And that means like I take the journey of I go through the pain and I learn everything about it. And then yeah, now there's a detachment from the negative emotions where okay, I understand this and maybe it was in my past and maybe I'm ashamed of it or maybe I didn't like that happened, but I've done the work to heal that. That's generally what that opportunity is. It brings things to the surface that, maybe we've been avoiding or not looking at. In the moment, that can be very difficult to receive, and it's going to trigger the emotions of our past. So wherever I left that situation last, I'm going to feel an emotion that's congruent with that. The intensity of the emotion is going to be a reflection of the pain that I already carry. We're responsible for whatever's inside of us. So that means when I feel something intensely, there's a piece for me in that because otherwise I wouldn't be feeling that. Like otherwise it would be no big deal. So that's the accountability piece is like, yeah, this may have been very difficult to hear and it may shake me in the moment. I might have been hit with monster emotions just because somebody said something, right? But it's not really the person saying, it's your history attached to that idea that could be really painful. And that's where the emotions are coming from.
So, thinking about a couple other situations, what about things, because I know you work with a good number of athletes, the pressure of like big moments tied to a championship event, or maybe it's not a championship event, maybe in like a case of an age grouper, it's the first time they're doing an event and the pressure associated with that even.
Well, yeah, just they're highly individual things. It's built up on your relationship to the situation. So if my history says like I have a lot of success in that situation, if I rise to the occasion, if I'm very confident in it, there might be a little bit of anxiety related to uncertainty to whatever the result would be, but it's generally like there's more excitement than there is anxiety. And we're going to work on a spectrum here. So it's like, okay, that's an optimal mindset of I feel pretty good in this stuff. I've done a lot of work where I'm confident in my abilities. So there's not a lot of gaps in my thinking about how I'm going to perform. I'm very consistent with my work. And so I know I can go do this thing. The only pressure we're really dealing with there is expectations of, am I building this up to be bigger than something that it really is, right? So if I'm adding extra to it, that generally doesn't serve me that well. It just creates more tension around the event. So we always try to minimize it. We always try to treat it like going to the office, like, this is what I do every day. This is my job. This is how I go about my business. So somebody that, let's say, they've failed in the big moments numerous times, or, maybe even it could even be once. It just depends on how devastating that was for them. How much pain did it cause, like when that happened? And have you unpacked it? Have you learned from it? Have you reworked that situation? Because if we've left it in this really devastating place, that emotion's still there. The anxiety is going to be kind of feeding that emotion, where our thoughts are going to be like, oh, like I failed, like I let people down, I let myself down, right? Like all the work was for nothing. We might have those thoughts going on. That's more to battle. There's kind of that spectrum of like, well, maybe I shine in all the races or events that don't matter or aren't as big or there's not as much attention there. And then when I start to get into the spotlight, there's those parts of me that backs off. And that would probably be more linked to kind of the childhood stuff we talked about, where it wasn't like safe to be in the spotlight or safe to be seen. We would want to rework those. Somebody that's brand new, that's just having a lot of anxiety because really it's going to be about one, the being an amateur and a beginner to something. You don't know all the details of it all entails. So there's so many uncertainties ahead where I don't have a lot of frame of reference to kind of build this path. So that's going to be stressful, but we can be very naive. That would actually be, in that case, let's say I just wanted to have fun with it and I had zero expectations. That would be an optimal mindset there. Is if we're not adding extra pressure, we're just going to have fun with it. And that's generally where you see like early success. We kind of have some early wins and then we get the reality check of, oh, I need to like deepen my learning around this. So it's a little bit of, if I'm a beginner and if I really care about what other people think and I'm very serious about stuff and if I'm worried about how I'll look, that's generally not going to be a productive mindset where I'm going to be very insecure in those moments. And so that's going to add extra pressures. And so I'm going to be trying to do everything perfect and I'm going to be too conscious with it. So these are all different variations, right? So it would be the kind of the ignorance is bliss would be a good beginner mindset. If I don't really know, I'm just going to go try it out, right? It's the young mindset of like, you don't know any better, so you just try a bunch of things, right? But then eventually you get hurt by things and then you start to question it more and be like, then we get the insecurities come up and now we have all these like maybe painful events that have stacked up where it's harder and harder to get to that place. And so I would say it's always we want to return back to a playful place with things. I talked about this with baseball last week where something I was good at, then had a lot of pain, and then my goal was only to return it back to a place of, okay, this is just kind of pure and fun again, right? It's that journey that's important because everything is this, if I leave it in the really dark, bad place, that's there, right? So now there's bitterness, resentment, that kind of stuff. And I might be carrying that with me into other things. I generally want to clean things up and bring them to a better place. And the original state of like any game is going to be play before it gets
Yeah,
serious. I'm doing this because I want to, I'm doing it because it's fun, those types of things.
right. Yeah, for sure. So one more. We're experiencing a time politically, socially that's pretty unstable and that's creating a lot of uncertainty in business, right? We've got a lot of macroeconomic events that are happening today that are creating huge uncertainties for businesses, business owners. What would be the things in cases like that, right?
I treat everything the same. It's the uncertainties is going to trigger things within you about limitation and lack and ultimately powerlessness, right? So if I'm worried about the problems of the world, I'm not focused on me. And so there's nothing I can really do about that. How do I relate to those things? That's what I can do something about. So in that uncertainty, it's, well, yeah, regardless, I'm going to go about my business the same way. For me personally, like during COVID, it's just like I didn't treat it any different. I've always worked from home anyway. Like it's it's
Yeah.
like everything I did then, it was like I was already doing. Like there was like zero change. That's finding the calm in the storm. That's finding, okay, yeah, like my job is to create certainty within myself. And so that's always going to be addressing my insecurities, leveling up my knowledge, skills, abilities, things like that. What can I do to be more valuable? What can I do? What interests me? What are the things I want to go in on and develop? That work should always be going on no matter what. And that's when we feel our happiest. That's when we feel empowered, is when we're taking action towards things that are meaningful to us. Because ultimately, if you develop the skills, like there's always going to be value that you can bring. It's working on what you can control. But if I kind of sit around and just say, like, oh, this is all happening around me and there's nothing I can do, well, I mean, you're going to be extremely disempowered. Things are going to feel more chaotic because now you're just rolling with your surroundings. You're not actually planting your feet and doing the work to feel more confident and strong in your abilities, right? So the recipe never changes. Ultimately, it's about developing a set of habits, the way you carry yourself, the way you work through problems. You create self-awareness to try and improve upon things. And then throughout that, you become more and more valuable. And you build that resilience that we always talk about. Resilience is your ability to work through and respond to stress. So if I'm always doing that anyway, it doesn't really matter what's thrown at me. I'm going to pivot and I'm going to adapt and I'm going to try and move with things because if I'm not doing that, I get fixated on needing things to be a certain way. I need things to be perfect or I need this climate to happen in order for me to be successful. And that's a losing game because I'm not, they always say, like, in great economies, it's like when the housing market was hot, right? It's just everybody selling houses, right? Realtors, they don't even have to work for it, right? So Coach Burt was talking about that 74% of realtors made zero deals last year, right? So there's still 25% of them doing deals, okay? But it's like those are the ones that are putting the work in, right? Those are the ones that are
Right.
staying up to date with their skill set, they're working relationships, they're keeping in touch. Because we adopt a set of habits, a skill set that can can create beneficial outcomes no matter what's going on, right? If I give my power away, then all that stuff becomes much more meaningful because I just have to ride the wave of whatever is going on in the macro, right? But I really just want to create my own kind of internal confidence where I feel like no matter what happens, I can adapt and change and I can be okay, right? And that's a special kind of confidence where you get to be a lot more present with things because you're not too worried about all the things in the future. You're just like, oh yeah, whatever happens, I'll figure it out. But you start to be able to
Right.
minimize a lot of those pressures. Obviously, like, preparation is important. So if you see problems coming ahead of time, it's just like, okay, well, what can I do to prepare better for this right now, right? We just want to check off some of the boxes, but then also it's the daily consistent actions that are going to make or break you regardless. And it doesn't really matter what's going on in the world. You can still regulate your system. You can still build an internal framework where you can feel okay about things or optimistic about things no matter what's going on.
Awesome. If we're going to close this out, right, and we're thinking about this permission to find this balance, what are your final closing thoughts?
Examine your relationship with pressure or being in a spotlight or putting yourself out there in a new way and just kind of you don't even have to put yourself in the situation yet. I think you can just think about it and you'll start to feel things in your body. And then you could look back on previous examples and it's like, did you show up the way you wanted to? And if you didn't, there's some work there, right? There's some stuff you can rework to gain that confidence we're always after. And the more you do that, the less we need to adopt a lot of the regulation, because you're kind of doing the pre-work, right? I'm preparing before I go into something. That's where we build confidence. Now it's like everything that comes to me in a pressure situation, I'm not getting overwhelmed by it because I've handled a lot of things on the front end. So something unexpected might come up, but I'm actually prepared for that, or I know it's not as big, so I can adjust in the moment, right? Because our peak performance is always going to be from being present. How can I just be up to speed with where I'm at now? I may need to adjust expectations based on how long I've been working at something, but how can I minimize the pressure? How can I address anxieties on the front end? How can I work these puzzles so that it basically gets me over that hump where I'm more willing to take the tough actions because that's what's going to further my growth and development. So if we adopt some regular time, regular focus on some of these things, cleaning up some of the past, and that's really what this podcast is about, is how do we give ourselves permission to move forward? It's really about, okay, I've had some things happen that make it very difficult for me to move forward. And the only way that gets lighter is generally by me looking at that stuff and learning from it so that I feel that confidence to move forward again. I don't have to stay stuck in the past. I'm unlocking it, examining it from a more mature perspective, and now I can evolve out of it. part of that is this ability to meet pressure and work through it. And a big part of this work is vulnerability. It's knowing that you're not going to be perfect. You might fall on your face. You will make mistakes. And that's all part of the process, and that's all okay. In that process, we develop self-compassion, this ability to be okay no matter what's going on, and because we know we'll get through it, and that we know that we can improve upon all these ideas. If we have low self-worth, we can work at that, but we have to go to the past and retrieve those parts of ourselves that made us believe that I'm not worthy or I'm not deserving. So, and that's healing work, is we're shifting our perspective on the past so that we can feel better now, and that leads to the brighter future.
All right. So, just like every week, if somebody's wanting to connect with you for one-on-one work, group work, what are the best places for them to find you and learn more?
Yeah, so if you just want to visit my website, brandonthielk.com, you can schedule a 30-minute strategy session with me there. We'll talk for about a half hour. I'll get a sense of where you're at and where you want to go, and maybe give some suggestions about things we should be working on. So I offer one-to-one work. I also offer teamwork, and I have a group program called the Lightning Lab. With that, you get 2 teaching sessions, one Q&A session, and weekly exercises, and a community function to engage with others. That's a 3-month membership. So whenever you start that, you get 3 months. We'll be wrapping up our second month of the first edition of that, and then I'll be putting out some new topics here shortly. So be on the lookout for that. Follow along on YouTube, and at Evolved Athlete on Instagram.
Yeah. And just like always, all the links for all that stuff will be in the show notes for the podcast. So, this was really good.
Mhm.
This is a good topic.
Yeah, this was fun. Yeah, so thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.